So after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, this massive, monumental task began, rebuilding the entire nation. Billions and billions of dollars were pledged. But what happened to all that money? Today we're going to dive into the incredible investigative findings of T. Christian Miller's book, Blood Money, to really unpack the disastrous reconstruction of Iraq. The author, he really doesn't mince words. His entire investigation leads to this one very stark conclusion. The whole effort was an undeniable failure. And we're not just talking about missing a few deadlines or going over budget here. The failure was systemic, and as we're about to see, the consequences were, well, they were devastating.
So, that's really the central question we're digging into. I mean, how does a project with this much funding and the backing of the world's only superpower go so horribly wrong? The book follows the money to find the answers, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's get into it.
Okay, so to really get why this all failed, you first have to go back to the promise. The vision that was sold to the American public and to the world was incredibly optimistic. They basically said, don't worry, this thing is going to pay for itself. And this is where you see that first huge crack in the plan. The gap between what was promised and what actually happened, it's just massive. The promise from the Bush administration was simple. Iraq's own oil revenues would cover all the costs. But that's not what happened, not even close. In the end, it was the American taxpayer who got stuck with the bill for billions. And right there, that was the first big promise to fall apart.
So, okay, the funding was the first broken promise. The next big problem was how the money that was there was actually spent. And this is where we find our first major clue that gets to the heart of the failure. A system just riddled with corruption and cronyism, right from the get-go.
So the book really paints a picture of this deeply, deeply flawed system. You have to imagine this chaotic, almost gold rush atmosphere in post-invasion Iraq. There was hardly any oversight. So instead of a fair, open, competitive process to find the best companies for the job, contracts were often handed out as sweetheart deals. They just went to politically connected corporations, completely bypassing the normal bidding process. The key thing to get here is that before a single shovel hit the ground, the whole system was pretty much set up for inefficiency and waste.
But look, this wasn't just about a couple of shady deals. The problem was so much deeper. What the investigation shows is that, yeah, there was greed, but beyond that, the entire effort was just plagued by this stunning lack of planning, no clear strategy, no real leadership. It was basically a system doomed from the start.
And this slide, wow, this just perfectly illustrates the real-world impact of all that incompetence. Just look at this. After billions and billions of dollars were spent, basic services for the Iraqi people were actually worse than they had been under Saddam Hussein's rule. Less reliable electricity, less access to clean water. Think about that for a second. Billions spent, and for the average Iraqi person, life on the ground actually got harder. That's just staggering.
All right, let's drill down on one specific, really crucial example of this systemic failure. One of the key projects was supposed to be a modern mobile phone network for the Iraqi police force. You know, something absolutely essential for security and just basic coordination. But because of all this incompetence we've been talking about, it never got installed properly. And this wasn't just some minor hiccup. This had real life-or-death consequences.
And that, right there, brings us to the most tragic part of this entire story. Because this isn't just about wasted money or bungled projects. All of this incompetence, all of this corruption, it had a very real and very high human price. First, let's just talk about the financial cost. It is absolutely staggering. We're talking about billions of U.S. taxpayer dollars. Money that was supposed to rebuild a nation, but instead it was just squandered. It vanished into this black hole of waste and fraud.
But, you know, the cost wasn't just in dollars. It was in human lives. In this incredibly chaotic and dangerous environment, around 500 contractors. These are people who went to Iraq to help rebuild. They lost their lives.
Yeah, and remember that failed police phone network we just talked about? Well, this is where that failure really hits home. The book draws a direct line from that failed project to the deaths of American soldiers and Iraqi police officers. Imagine being under attack and having no reliable way to call for backup. They were just left out there, isolated, vulnerable. And it was a direct result of a project that was paid for but never ever delivered.
Okay, so let's pull all these pieces together now. When you take the broken promises, the out-of-control cronyism, and just the systemic incompetence, you start to see the book's final and pretty damning verdict.
So here's the bottom line, the crucial takeaway. The reconstruction wasn't just a financial disaster, it was a huge strategic failure.
According to Miller, this toxic mix of incompetence and corruption, that's a key reason why so much of the Iraqi population eventually turned against the American occupation. I mean, the whole effort to win hearts and minds just collapsed, because every promise of a better life was being broken right there in front of everyone.
And so that leaves us with this one final, really difficult question that just kind of hangs in the air. The story that Blood Money lays out is just one of staggering failure on a global scale. It tells us where the money went, it shows us how lives were lost, but the one thing it can't fully answer is the toughest question of all. When all is said and done, who is ever really held accountable for something like this?